Good evening from London, wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and you are listening to Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast, your one-stop shop for professional wrestling insight, news, and reviews on a daily basis. And today, it's Sunday, and there's no AEW Collision today, which means Sunday FUNDAY is back, and boy oh boy do we have a fun show lined up for you guys today, and we've got an even more fun panel to do it with. Let me start by introducing the co-host of the show, Clark Taylor. Clark, how are you today?
Dude, I'm fired up to be here. It's a miracle I'm feeling as good as I am because I had maybe a little too much fun at UFC 298 last night, but that's neither here nor there. Unbelievable fight card it was. Unfortunately, I would have missed Collision anyway, so it doesn't bug me. I'm excited. It's Sunday FUNDAY. Let's get into it. Let's play some games.
Absolutely. Also joining us today, we have somebody who's returning for the first time in a while, and that is Ignacio. How are you, Ignacio?
I'm feeling pretty good, Ben. Glad to be back on the show. You know what I like about Wrestling Republic is that we are truly an international show because I'm coming to you live from Santiago, Chile. And I went out, I tried to get a haircut, tried to get a beard trim, so I'm neck bearded right now. I'm reeking of alcohol, and I've been walking around, so I'm sweaty and stinky all day. So basically, I'm like an AEW fan right now.
Well, also joining us today, we have one of AEW's biggest fans, and that, of course, is Soul. Soul, how are you?
Oh, Wrestling Republic Daily and Wrestling Republic Universe. The devil has arrived for its heaven or hell. Good old Sunday FUNDAY. Good to see you as well. Obviously, my old personality, Hollywood Soul, was here yesterday. He's back over to the Highlands of Glencoe, as he should rightfully go. Watching Dog the Bounty Hunter as he is. I see Ignacio's there, stinky and smelly, wherever he likes to be. That's just because he's experiencing physical exercise for the first time in a couple of months. So congratulations to you there, buddy. But since the devil is here, let's get on with some heaven or hell, shall we?
Absolutely, but before we do, we have some comments. The comments are blowing up. We got David Marge. Welcome to the show, David. And we've also got Bobby Batito. Welcome, Bobby, who's saying Rio is facing Emerson Jane at Progress Wrestling next Sunday. I'm excited for that show. I certainly am. It's going to be a great one. And David saying that Whittaker was a good win. And, of course, Volk losing last night in UFC. That was a shocker. And David Sheldon in the comments saying, welcome back, Ignacio. Always a pleasure. Our paths will cross again soon, I'm sure.
No, I got a comment about David later. Let's wait for the show.
Oh, let's just get right into it, shall we? Because first things first, we need to talk about what this is, right? If you guys haven't been watching Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast for, I guess for months and months now, you won't know what this is. We haven't done it since Collision started in the summer. Yeah. But what Wrestling Heaven and Hell is that each person on the panel argues something that they hate for Wrestling Hell. Then I decide out of the three options which one to put in Wrestling Hell, so who debated it the best. Then we do the same thing for Wrestling Heaven, but with something that they like. And then there's a new one. Ooh, something new. And that new one is Wrestling Purgatory, which basically just means something that you think should be improved. And you think it's currently bad, but it could be worked on and made to be a great thing that eventually belongs in Wrestling Heaven. It's going to be a really fun one. I love these episodes. But Clark, what are you going to send to Wrestling Hell?
This is an interesting one because it's something that I actually liked for a long time, and I'm not trying to argue against myself, but I've recently flipped because it's time to make a change, and I'm kind of over it at this point, and that's cross-promotional, taking shots at the other side where there's no storyline that can be paid off. CM Punk will not have an encounter with the Young Bucks. That is not going to happen. There's not going to be a Forbidden Door storyline between the two. Knock it off. Quit bringing it up. Outside of maybe Jack Perry, when he returns, I don't want to hear about it anymore. Tired of it. It's overplayed. The subtle jabs at the company as a whole, I don't mind. Individual performers that are working on the other side, Cody Rhodes that's moved, CM Punk that's moved, the opposite direction. You know, you Dolph Ziggler over on Impact now. You've got, or Nick Nemeth, I apologize. And you know, right, there's been quite a few crossover talents on each side. There's no reason to take shots at the individual talent. I don't mind if you're maybe a babyface taking a shot at the other company or saying our product is better thing, but stop taking shots at wrestlers you cannot wrestle or superstars you cannot have a match against. If we're not going to get to see the payoff, I don't need to hear about it. It doesn't make sense to me anymore, especially now that it feels more individualized than it was before. Like when, even back in the day when Cody Rhodes was destroying the throne, at least at that time, that felt like just a shot at the company. I guess Triple H, you throw it in there, but at the end of the day, Triple H is just the head of creative. He wasn't necessarily a fully active wrestler at that point. I understand he was wrestling here and there. He wrestled Orton after that time and whatnot, but he wasn't an active performer. It was a shot at the WWE. It was a shot at the throne. And I don't mind that, but to call out a performer that you can't have a storyline with does not make sense. And the direction, it doesn't work anymore. It's done for me.
I actually, you make a lot of great points there, to be honest. And in a way, I've never really been a fan of it. I thought the entire throne thing with Cody, I mean, I didn't really like that even. Yeah, I just feel like it's just a way, and AEW they just did it all the time at the start of their company. In order to get the crowd into the show each time, they just do that to get a cheap pop. And oddly I understand enough, why they did it, but
to your point, Ben, though, oddly enough, I actually feel like the Cody Throne segment is something that's looked upon less fondly in hindsight than it was at the time, which is bizarre to me. Usually it would be the opposite, where you're like, you know what? Actually, that was pretty good. But this time, that's not been the case. It's more like, ooh, that's a little cringy now that you think about it, because he went over to WWE. It doesn't.
I almost like it better, to be honest. Now I almost like it better in hindsight, because I hated it back then, and now I think it's a bit funny. But I don't think when he did that he had any intention of going back. But it's almost like he started the story then. That hang on a second. These foundations that WWE has built, I want to come and I want to smash them back down because I want to win the title that my father, he got ripped out of his hands. He wants to win that championship. And in hindsight, it kind of makes sense. But no way was that the direction when he did it. He did it because he wanted to get a cheap pop. That's the reality of...
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, David Marge is saying that's a shot at Triple H.
It was, but I think that's different because he's the booker. It's not, right? It was in Cody being in the EVP role. To me, that one's a little different than the current stuff where it's like the Bucks aren't going to wrestle CM Punk, at least not anytime soon.
Absolutely, I do agree with you there. And by the way, people in the comments, I want to get your guys' input on all three of these guys' Heaven and Hell's takes as well to help me make my decision. But firstly, Ignacio, now I want to hear your decision. What are you gonna try and send to Wrestling Hell?
Well, you told me about this topic yesterday, Ben. First of all, you told me, I asked you who was going to be on the show, and you said, well, it's going to be Soul. And I'm like, okay, the show needs help, so I'll go on. So it's I thought about this topic, and I was like, you said at the end we're going to vote, or the fans are going to vote, or whatever, on who makes more sense or which one's the best one. And I figured, well, I'm not going to win because nobody's going to like what I have to say about this topic. And unless Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, the Men in Black, come and use their doohickey to zap everybody's mind on the show and the fans out there on what wrestling,
wipe their memory
is and should be. I wish they would do it to Chaos and David Sheldon, and then maybe the shows would be better. But unless they do that, I'm not gonna win. So I was in Houston or Sugarland Texas when Sting announced that he was going to have his retirement match at Revolution. And I told myself, if there's even an inkling of a chance of me going to Greensboro to watch Sting's last match, I'm going to go. If there's a chance I have that weekend off, or they send me home, or I can get it, I'm going to go, because I want to be a part of that, because that's something that's going to be special. Or at least it was, until we found out the Young Bucks were going to be the opponents. I mean, you cannot tell me that Tony Khan sat down with Sting and Tony Khan said, "Okay, Sting, we're going to plan this out. We're going to have you, your last match is at Revolution. You want to retire? That's fine." And Sting said, hold on. All right, Tony, that's great. And then he pointed over at the Young Bucks and said, "I want those guys." You're not going to convince me otherwise that Sting picked, no matter what they say in the dirt sheets or media or whatever, that Sting picked the Young Bucks to have his last match. Because Sting came in an era where kayfabe was still a thing, and they still tried to make wrestling look as real as possible, even though the fans were kind of like, we kind of know this is phony or whatever, but they're doing their best to make us believe in the late 80s. But, Sting came up with Warrior. They were bodybuilding partners, and then they forgot who the trainer was. But basically, they took their money and whatever, and didn't teach them much, because they were as green as goose turds when they broke into the business. And at least Sting improved. But Sting came up in an era where they protected kayfabe, and the Young Bucks have done nothing but to destroy that, to belittle wrestling. I don't believe them as heels, because they're just people playing heels. They're not making us believe, and that's all they've done ever since they came to AEW or helped develop AEW, is they make fun of the business, and they're just playing characters. They don't put themselves in that character as a heel. First of all, it doesn't make any sense on how they turned heel. They should have turned heel when this whole CM Punk thing developed, and they should have tried to make an angle of it, but they're too immature to do it. So now they're playing heel, and one of the reasons that why they're doing this is to make themselves relevant again, because they're more irrelevant than ever since they started in AEW, and they're just trying to revive themselves at the same time as trying to give Sting a send-off. I mean, no Jay Lethal, no Jeff Jarrett, no trying to bring, Kurt Angle in, maybe for an angle. I know he's back and forth as far as his health or whatever. No Mick Foley, trying to get Mick Foley a part of this. I mean, they have Flair a part of this, but once Ric Flair starts being Ric Flair, they spank him and say, "No, don't say this and do that." So this whole Sting last match debacle with the Young Bucks, I mean, it's embarrassing. I feel sorry for Sting, because I don't think he's getting the send-off he deserves. And I think that's part of because Sting, when he started in the wrestling business, he wasn't a wrestling fan. Warrior wasn't a wrestling fan. Goldberg wasn't a wrestling fan. Lex Luger wasn't a wrestling fan, but I think these people were more influenced. They weren't a wrestling fan before they got into the business, and they weren't wrestling fans when they got into the business. So I think they're more influenced as far as like, hey, let's do this because this is what's good. And they've convinced Sting of that. And he's just going along for the ride. I mean, Sting and Luger became better workers than Goldberg and Warrior. But what I'm saying is that since they weren't fans before and they weren't fans when they got into the business, it was just more of that, a business to them to make money, that they're more influenced to do things that doesn't make sense. And I think it's just a shame that this is going to be Sting's last match. I think it's embarrassing. I think the Young Bucks have done nothing but be detrimental to the wrestling business than anything else. And to have them in Sting's last match just doesn't make any sense. And I just wish more for Sting, and it's not going to happen. That's sad.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, Ignacio, I don't completely disagree in terms of I don't think Sting's final opponents should have been the Young Bucks. I really do not think that's what they should have done. But at the same time, I am enjoying what they're doing right now with this new EVP gimmick. They should have done it way earlier. You're right about that. What you're completely wrong about, in my opinion, is that Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal should have been the opponents when ratings and all of this social media engagement, every metric you can measure it on, Jay Lethal and more so Jeff Jarrett have been complete failures in AEW thus far. On every time they're on TV, the ratings go down. Every time something gets announced that they're in, people complain. People don't tune in. Go away, Heat.
I won't disagree with that, but I mean, I just wish that Jarrett would have stayed around. And they got rid of Jarrett and they gave Road Dogg his position, which I still don't understand. But Jarrett would have stayed in WWE and would have been on the ups with Triple H, because I think he could contribute it much more behind the scenes, because I don't think he should necessarily be on TV wrestling as much he has every other week or even a few times a month, maybe for a comeback match here and there or whatever for filler. But I think Jarrett can be contributed more behind the scenes in WWE, because I think they use him more. But definitely, I think he'd play a bigger role or a main role or a better role as one of Sting's opponents or around the scenario or the storyline than the Young Bucks would. And I don't know why Jarrett gets so much heat from fans, because he's a great mind for the business. You know, I think, like I said, he can probably contribute more behind the scenes than anything else, but I think he's been very underrated and misunderstood. And look what they've done with Jay Lethal coming in from ROH, probably one of the best talents that ROH has ever had, and TNA as well. And they just totally blew him up and misused him. So in that aspect, yeah, you're right. I mean, why would they use him in this storyline? Because they've treated him like turd. You know, so yeah, but I just still think the Young Bucks is the best option ever in any scenario. But I mean, you know, I'm just saddened by this is going to be Sting's send-off, because he doesn't deserve this. He deserves better.
Yeah, I will agree on that point. Bobby Petito agrees too, and he's saying that he wants FTR in there. I mean, there are quite a few options you could throw in, but Soul, I want to know what you want to send to wrestling hell.
What is hell? It's a burning abyss that, you know, the worst of the worst should be in, you know. But most importantly, individuals that belong in hell are sinners. The worst of the worst, the sin of the sins, people that walk the walk but can't talk the talk should be in that place. So my suggestion for wrestling hell is CM Punk return to the wrestling business. He should have never returned. He should have stayed at home, made his movies, made his comics, because look at the facts. CM Punk's return to debut in AEW, returning to the wrestling business after 7 years, for the first couple of months was like a very lovely relationship. It was absolutely fine. No problems to be seen across the board, but cracks started to appear. The man got broken. Broke his foot diving, and then what happens afterwards? We have the interim AEW World Championship, whole saga of Jon Moxley there. Comes back, wins the championship again, broken again. And then he goes on his little tirade on the all-out press conference, forever endued in an image of a sweaty, donut-loving man with the blood down his face. And then what happened there? The whole brawl-out situation happened, and people soured on the man. People who are his hardcore fans now can't see him in the same light again. All they see, as when you mentioned the word CM Punk, is a man with rage in his eyes and just distasteful venom coming out of his mouth. Then he comes back for Collision. Things seem okay at first, but then we hear about the whole ban from Collision element. People not allowed there. Cancellation not even allowed there. He gets his own little world championship as well that he can run and do whatever he pleases. All then comes around, and because a little Hollywood son says about glass, he then kicks off the handles again. What a child. I think AJ Lee needs to give this man his pacifier and put him to bed because it was past his bedtime, the little angry boy. Then what happens? He gets fired from maybe the second best wrestling promotion in the entire world. Then what happens? He makes his little debut at Survivor Series in Chicago, Illinois. Yes, he's fired up the Mexico boys. Has a little house show feud with Mr. Dominic Mysterio. His first televised match in WWE in 10 years. What happens? Look again. He is injured, broken again. My God. I think this man's made out of glass. Maybe that's why he's so angry all the time. So, yes, what happens there? Look, we have a man who comes back into the wrestling.
Real glass.
But this is it. CM Punk, he can talk the talk, but he can't walk the walk. He should have just stayed home because what he's come back is he's tarnished himself. All that people see in CM Punk is an angry man-child for that every action he does, and little knockback happens and breaks his little fragile ego, fragile mind, fragile body. So yes, I do say it now myself. Chin chin. CM Punk's return to the wrestling business, I think that's a sinner right into wrestling hell.
Oh, so I did like some of the lines you had in there, but I mean, come on, this man, he returned to WWE. There's not been any issues there yet. He got injured. It happens in wrestling. But the fact of the matter is, like, he was WWE's most successful Twitter post ever, right? The highest engagement ever on a social media post for them. His merch sold out instantly. I mean, so far, if you take out the injury of the equation, CM Punk clearly, has a lot of fans still, because it was such a big moment, and they're buying his merchandise. So I see where you're coming from. I liked some of the lines, but I'm not sending CM Punk's return to wrestling hell.
Well, I need to say there as well, what is WWE? It's a wrestling company. The man has to wrestle. If he just has to make all these...
He's only had one match, like you said.
And he's broken already. I mean, that's not the signs of a wrestler. That's just the sign of a merch guy who makes and sells all his t-shirts and talks the talk. I think maybe he is a good merch guy, but he isn't a good wrestler.
Oh, come on. He's a good wrestler. But I'm going to wrap up now, right? I'm going to wrap this topic up because I've heard your points. I've listened to all your points and I've respected all of your points. But so CM Punk is not going to wrestling hell.
That's right.
So,
nope.
So it comes down to, are we going to put cross-promotional digs and disses into wrestling hell, or are we going to put the Young Bucks facing Sting into wrestling hell? And my decision is we're going to put wrestling cross-promotional digs into wrestling hell, and the reason for that is Young Bucks. Young Bucks and Sting. Young Bucks and Sting hasn't happened versus Young Bucks versus Sting and Darby Allin hasn't happened yet. So if this goes badly and they don't capitalize from it, then I very well would have probably gone the other way. But it hasn't happened yet, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But now let's jump into something a little bit more positive. And so I can tell you're all riled up from that CM Punk rant. So take a breather and tell us about something that you love, something that you think deserves to be in wrestling heaven.
Heaven. The land of the great... Oh, I dropped my lemon. The land of the best of the best opportunity, the best individuals. So something I will put into wrestling heaven is simple. I absolutely adore Drew McIntyre's current run. I love what the man is doing. He is the player hater, the Scottish psychopath. He is truly the man that you would see on the high streets of the old Scotland and think, yep, that's a guy who could eviscerate you with his fist and his mouth. God damn, the man could go crazy. So, where do I think about why this deserves in wrestling heaven? Look at it. This is the man, even a couple months ago, was floating. I personally didn't like the whole stuff with the Judgment Day at Survivor Series. Not a fan of that. But now he's taking opportunities that are presented to himself. Look at Punk's injury, right? Something that happened, and this man took an opportunity and went with it. An opportunity arose, an opportunity to be, featured more, and his Twitter game's been strong. We've got great merch out of it as well. So honestly, yeah, Drew Macker's current run, maybe one of the best he's ever done, even more than his ICW stuff, his TNA stuff, absolutely as well. I honestly, it would be a shame if Drew McIntyre leaves the WWE, because I feel like this is something that could go on for a long time.
Yeah, I do agree, actually. I'm loving this Drew McIntyre run. It is a heel turn which has felt natural, and a lot of heel turns feel sudden, but this one has had a transition, and it's worked really, really well. It has legs, and I'm excited to see where it goes next. So, Soul, that is a brilliant point. But now, Ignacio, I want to hear from you. What do you want to send to wrestling heaven?
Well, I'm going to go with a little bit of nostalgia here. And since it's WrestleMania season, I'm going to go with not only my favorite WrestleMania match of all time, but my favorite match of all time. The match that, in my opinion, catapulted the Austin era, and that's WrestleMania 13 in Chicago. Bret the Hitman Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I Quit match at WrestleMania 13. And, you know, it was everything from you can think of a modern match to an old school NWA brawl out fight in Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret the Hitman Hart. I mean, if you go back, if fans here of the Wrestling Republic haven't seen it, go back and watch it. And that's what a wrestling match is, because it was just so believable. You're at the height of the Austin era, and without Bret Hart, there is no Stone Cold Steve Austin, because nobody could have catapulted Stone Cold Steve Austin than like Bret Hart did. Not Shawn Michaels, not Undertaker, not nobody else. It was Bret Hart. That feud made Stone Cold Steve Austin and catapulted him to the superstar he became. And I mean, it had storytelling. It had Ken Shamrock for the UFC fans of that era as the special referee. It had the blood. It had everything, and encompasses on what a wrestling story should be. Not only that, it is probably the greatest double turn of all time, because, you know, Bret Hart went in as the baby face, Steve Austin went in as the heel, and then at the end of the match, we had the big tough double turn where, you know, Bret Hart wouldn't let go of the hold. Ken Shamrock had to suplex him off. You know, Austin had the crowd in the palm of his hands at the end of the match. They were all cheering Austin, and he's refuses to be carried out to the back. He walks out on his own, the face full of blood. Everybody knows the famous camera shot. So I think that match, or that feud and that match, encompasses everything that wrestling should be. And I think it's just a beautiful moment in wrestling history, not only in WWE history. And it's a match that, you know, everybody in NXT, I hope that they show, because that's what a wrestling match is, and that's what storytelling is. And to me, that's one of the greatest WrestleMania moments of all time, and definitely, in my opinion, the best match of all time, if not in wrestling, in WWE history.
That's a good one.
Well, I think a lot of people disagree with you on a lot of things, Ignacio, but I think that one is something which is really hard to disagree with, because that match, obviously, I mean, it inspired a generation as well, but like you said, the storytelling within the match itself was one of the things which just made it so special. And everybody felt connected in it. Everybody felt drawn in by the end of it. And David Marge is saying that he's got to go and, you know, watch it back later now. And Bobby Petito is there agreeing as well. And David wants to put that in wrestling heaven. Well, that is certainly an excellent choice. But Clark, what about you? What do you want to send to wrestling heaven?
I gotta be honest with you, that is going to be a tough one to beat, and I'm going to do my best. I nearly called an audible halfway through from what I was originally going with, but I'm actually going to stick to my guns. I'm going to stick with my original game plan here. I'm not going Patrick Mahomes and calling a new play at the line of scrimmage. Going with what my original thoughts were. I've often said, I believe Shawn Michaels is the most talented performer in the history of professional wrestling. I think he's the best to ever do it, in my eyes. Got to be specific here, though. What he's done, I've been hosting Off the Air with Drizzy and Shad, shout out, on Tuesday nights. and really focused on NXT for about 6-8 months now. What he's done as a booker, transitioning NXT out of the 2.0 era and into this current era, while still developing talent, consistently sending main roster ready stars up and having to deal with the turnover between call-ups and whatnot, has been nothing short of sublime. Shawn Michaels, as a booker of NXT, since the transition out of 2.0, I want to send to Wrestling Heaven. He's just been outstanding. You look at Braun Breaker, Born Ready for It, Tiffany Stratton, names are countless. And not only that, the Tuesday night product rivals the main roster product still consistently with mostly green performers. And he just gets the best out of them. It's that coach. It's like Billy Bean in the Oakland A's. It's like Moneyball, right? He's never going to have the most stacked roster in the business. He's not. That's just based on the nature of the fact that it is the developmental brand still. He will never have the most stacked. He will never have the AEW roster. He'll never have the Raw roster, and he'll never have the SmackDown roster. And despite that, consistently telling great stories, Trick and Mello, both immediately ready. The family's been awesome. Meta 4 has been outstanding. I think it's the best women's division in wrestling. From a booking perspective, I currently still believe NXT is the best women's division booking-wise in wrestling, not necessarily talent or roster-wise, but from a booking perspective, the storytelling is excellent, consistently excellent. And he's having to work with a lot of moving parts. Becky Lynch being sent down inserts her into an outstanding story immediately, and we get awesome matches out of it. Ripley coming down even under his tenure, multiple stars going down and up and here and there. To navigate that with the amount of accuracy that he's had on just getting things right blows me away. It shows you how great his mind is, and it's a testament to the fact that he is one of the, if not in my eyes, the greatest performer of all time.
Yep. I mean, that is a great shout. I said Ignacio's was going to be tough to top, but you really did your best right there. Soul, unfortunately, once again, I'm going to have to put you out because I'm loving this Drew McIntyre heel turn, but again, we're in the process of it, so I don't want to judge it too quickly yet. Shawn Michaels NXT is obviously in the process too, but we've seen it for long enough now that it is fair to make judgment on it. But it still just is not as good as Bret Hart,
Fair.
Of course, versus Stone Cold WrestleMania 13. I mean, that's just special, isn't it? Ignacio wins that
I might have
round.
admitted it myself there, guys, to be honest. If I wasn't competitive, I might have been like, that was a good one.
An all-timer, it's an all-timer.
It is. It truly is timeless. But now on to Wrestling Purgatory. Something which you think right now is maybe closer to Wrestling Hell, but you think it's got the potential to go to Wrestling Heaven if it's improved. Ignacio, what would you send to Wrestling Purgatory to improve it?
Well, I went from nostalgia to I'm going to go to modern day. And first of all, I don't think that more eyes have been in the main event scene at WrestleMania than they are now. With everybody involved with Roman and The Rock and Cody and Seth Rollins and everything else, the bloodline, everything else that is surrounding the main event scene for WrestleMania. And that's a good thing. But I just like a lot of other people aren't big a fan on how we got there, because just a lot of it doesn't really make any sense. And I think WWE had good intentions, because you got old timers there like Bruce Pritchard, who I'm not a very big fan of, but I think what happened was that WWE said, you know what, we'll do Rock and Roman, and if the fans turn on us and they don't like it, well, we got Cody anyway, and we can go that route. I don't think we would have gotten the response that WWE would have gotten the response that they did if, for example, we had Rock at number 30 in the Royal Rumble, goes crazy, throws everybody out and wins it. And, you know, he has his rightful place at WrestleMania to challenge Roman. But instead, they went with Cody. Next thing you know, we have this scenario that doesn't make any sense where Cody gives up his title match to The Rock. And the fans turned on it very quickly because they called BS on it. And, you know, WWE listened to the fans and said, okay, now we're going to go back with Cody. And now we're somehow going to interject Seth Rollins. And all of a sudden, Seth Rollins is Cody's friend and says, hey, I'm going to help you fight this fight for no reason whatsoever. Because now that Cody's challenged Roman Reigns for the title, oh, I'm going to help you out, even though it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I'm not really in the picture, but I am in the picture. And, oh, I'm going to face the challenger, the Elimination Chamber that's coming out in Perth. And why am I in this mess? I don't know. Why is Seth Rollins in this mess? I don't know. And I think because of the talent that's involved, WWE fans are willing to forgive it. But I just think it would have been better that keep Seth Rollins out of it and have him start a feud with whoever is going to win the Elimination Chamber or whatever, and keep him in that scenario. And let's try to find somebody else to help Cody and maybe have him, that person, in the main event of night one with Cody, tag team with Cody against Rock and Roman Reigns. And I think that person who, unlike The Rock, would have actually sold more tickets to WrestleMania, because I don't think Rock joining in the scenario sold any social media views and all that stuff, whatever.
No.
That
No.
in
You
my
had me for a
opinion,
while.
doesn't matter, because I don't think Rock being in WrestleMania is selling tickets. I don't think more people logged on to Ticketmaster or whatever and bought more tickets to see Rock at Wrestle. I just don't believe that. Maybe 2,000 people, whatever. But I think if Stone Cold Steve Austin was interjected in this scenario, more tickets would be sold to WrestleMania. More money would be made by interjecting Stone Cold Steve Austin as Cody Rhodes' partner in WrestleMania. Now you got Cody and Austin against Rock and Roman. That's your main event for night one. That's what should be the night one main event. I think that should have been the scenario.
I agreed with a lot of what you said until you said The Rock didn't bring, didn't sell many tickets. Rock in this day and age is a far, far, far bigger draw than Stone Cold is, right? And Stone Cold would have still sold tickets. He certainly would have. But not on The Rock's level, because not many people... I mean, let's not forget, The Rock's the most followed male on Instagram, if I'm not mistaken. Like, he's... one of the most famous men in the world right now, if not the most famous man in the world right now. So it brought in so many more eyes. We saw that on social media numbers. We spoke about CM Punk's record earlier. The Rock broke that record with his return. But Sol, what about you? What do you think should be sent to Wrestling Purgatory to be revived?
Moogly move. Ignacio had a take there and a half. Really had you in the palm of his hands until he messed up. Good God, man. Good God. So, my purgatory thing is about a championship. Technically, the concept of this championship. I think it's necessary, but at its current state, it's not necessary. So, my wrestling purgatory is the entire concept of the WWE United States Championship. So, here's what I got for this, right? If you look at the big companies like TNA, like an AEW, and even a New Japan, what they've done, their championships are not, necessarily country specified. Now, what I mean by that is TNA, they don't have like a United States Central Championship or even a UK Championship. You've seen what New Japan had with the US Championship and United Kingdom Championship Osprey introduced. That's all been scrapped for a global, international type of championship, which I would say there with AEW is the International Championship, TNA is the Digital Media Championship, and for New Japan is the Global Championship. WWE has the Intercontinental Championship, which you definitely keep. It's a beautiful belt in itself, and the prestige and history of it is necessary. The United States Championship, I think, in modern day and age, is not needed because WWE is a global entity. They're doing shows all over the world. They're doing shows on now streaming with the Netflix deal. So why have a championship that just represents the United States? It's not needed. You know, some people don't like the United States outright for some reason. Some people don't like the United States Championship because it's always just the secondary one to the Intercontinental. Some even say it's a lower mid-card belt. If anything, have it mean something in its end and have it be unified with the North American Championship of NXT, and out of that create something like a WWE Global Championship or even a WWE Streaming Championship that can only be defended on when the company moves to Netflix, or is only defended on Netflix shows or something like that. Because if you just have a championship that represents the United States in a whole, when you do international shows and all that, some people aren't going to resonate and connect with it. It's a beautiful looking belt in its current stealth, absolutely. But it's always going to be second fiddle to the Intercontinental Championship, which has a unified worldwide appeal to it within the name. So yeah, country specified belt with the United States Championship, I don't think is necessarily needed in this day and age. When you're a smaller company and you're only doing shows in your local area, that's fine. But when you're a big company like WWE, a country specified belt, I don't think it's needed.
I mean, fair enough. That I understand your point there, of course. It has a lot of history, but again, you know me, I'm not a fan of singles titles, full stop. I don't understand, so mid-card titles, I don't understand why they particularly exist. So, decent point, but Clark, what about you? What would you send to Wrestling Purgatory?
This one's an easy one for me. It's finish the story. I'm sending finish the story right to Purgatory. Cody Rhodes has an excellent story to tell, and I would like to see it finished. Greatly like to see it finished. That's the truth. What bugs me about this is he spent a whole summer on a show incapable of finishing the story. There's nothing more telegraphed than the idea that for basically 9 months after last year's Mania until you hit the Royal Rumble, the only route to Roman Reigns is winning the Royal Rumble. The only route for Cody. He's not going over to SmackDown to do it. Now there's all kinds of crossover stuff. LA Knight's on Raw. Everybody's on SmackDown. It doesn't matter, right? But we couldn't do that along the way. Not once. Story was always in the back of our mind. We brought it up every time he asked us what we wanted to talk about. And he did mention it, but just him telling the story on the microphone isn't fighting from underneath. It isn't overcoming the odds to take down the big bad guy Roman Reigns, to defeat the final boss and complete the story. That's what I want. And as much emotion as Cody delivers on the microphone, finish the story to me has become a cliche. It's become a trope. Because unless the next tagline, unless the next t-shirt is what now? ? I don't know where you even go. We aren't leading to positivity coming out of the story being finished. There's too many stones left unturned here. And that's why I think this deserves to be in Purgatory, especially because I think Cody and the fans deserve better because of how excellent this story is on paper. It is the most valuable, best thing going storytelling-wise in all of professional wrestling. And even though we did prioritize engagement and pump fake everybody on The Rock replacing him, which I enjoyed, we still ended up with Cody winning the Rumble, and that was convoluted. Why would he step aside? That's not finishing the story. Then he changed his mind at the press conference. As much as it did for engagement, as much as it did for viewership, there's a way to use higher quality storytelling to gain a similar reaction. And in a way where even if you're torn on Cody, even if you're not the biggest Cody fan, you just want to see him get it done. I do agree that on paper, off screen, there's nothing more than you want to see him fulfill his father's destiny, do all of that. It's amazing. I want to see that type of energy on screen more often.
Oh, right, you all make good points here. Clark, there was a lot of things that you said which overlapped with what Ignacio said, which I guess supports both of your points. You also love to double down on Cody Rhodes and finishing the story here. So, I liked your point. I do agree that single titles need more meaning, but I don't think the United States specifically is that issue. So for that reason, and also the reason I don't want to annoy America, I'm gonna save that. That's not going to Wrestling Purgatory. But it comes down to Clark and Ignacio once again. And for one reason and one reason only, I am going to say Clark has won. And that reason is Ignacio. You said Stone Cold is a bigger draw than The Rock in 2024. Come on, that's not true. That's factually incorrect. But on that note, guys, Clark, I guess, wins the show. He got two of his choices sent to the respective places, but it's been a banger of an episode. If you're on Spotify, please leave us a cheeky 5 stars. If you're on all these platforms, just support us. And we'll be back tomorrow for Mailbag Monday. Send in those questions, and we will get to answering them tomorrow. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Clark. Thank you, Ignacio. Thank you, Sol, for joining me here today. And we will see you guys tomorrow. Peace!